Welcome to the Learning Experience powered by CAST. I'm one of your hosts, Kelly Suding.
And I'm Luis Perez.
And I'm Bryan Dean.
We are three educators here ready to break down barriers until learning has no limits. Let's do this.
Well, folks, welcome back to another wonderful learning experience powered by CAST. This is a super secret bonus episode that you get to listen to. I always am Bryan Dean. I got that clean gangster lean and that dip in my hip and that strut in my cut. And I am here with two of our UDL award winners from 2025 who are doing amazing work and have done amazing work with implementation across an entire state here in the U.S. And I am so very excited to have them both here. If you don't know, then you should probably get to know these names. So with me today, I have JoAnn Miller and I have Michelle Ring-Hanson. Hey, what's up, ladies? How are we?
We're doing great. How are you?
Oh, you know, I'm trying to stay warm up here in this northern U.S. area up here.
I'm joining you in trying to stay warm, Bryan.
I know, right? So just for the listeners, your work was done in Wisconsin, correct?
Correct.
And so if you are one of our international listeners, Wisconsin and Michigan, where I am from, are in the middle of the country, but at the north top of the country. In fact, Michigan is one of those places where sometimes you have to go south to get into Canada. So we kind of all have experienced the cold and kind of lived through it. Now, JoAnn, what is it like where you're at right now as far as temperature and trying to stay warm?
Well, we're coming off of an Arctic blast right now. So today we might get into the low 30s, but over the past couple of days, we've been in the negatives. So negative zero.
All right. So there is so much, ladies, that I want to talk to you about, not just our shared interest in snow and the winter, but also just kind of what's been going on with you, ladies, what you did receive the 2025 UDL Innovative Practice Award, which is a massive award. I mean, we get tons of entries, and that award spans all practices. So that's from higher ed to early childhood, from workforce to K-12 education, from industry to classrooms. We just get a ton of folks that get nominated for that award. And then we have a committee that goes through all of the applications, takes a look at them and says, yeah, this is the one. And then that gets reviewed again. And so it's a kind of a lengthy process, but it's one that we stand by because it allows us to get to know the folks and what they are doing. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you both received the Innovative Practice Award for basically long-term, deep systemic implementation of UDL across Wisconsin.
Yes.
That is correct.
That is, for me, that's a mind blower. So just given some stats, how many school districts are there in the state of Wisconsin?
There's 485 or 86, Michelle?
I think 485.
Okay.
485. And how many, if you know, you may not, and that's okay. We can probably take a look at it and do a little fact finding of our own. But how many students does that encompass within the state of Wisconsin?
Well,
I know in the CISA 8 area, we have just a little over 20,000 students, and we're all rural districts.
And so can you explain what a rural district is?
So in Wisconsin, there's rural, urban, suburban districts. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the exact definition of what a rural district is.
Sure.
But
just a quick explanation would be
a large geographic area with small numbers of students. Yeah. So, for example, one of our schools, each class has 3 or 4 students in.
Yeah. And that, when we take a look at that, so just doing a quick fact finder, it's about 164,000 students, 164,500 students, somewhere in between that, throughout the entire state of Wisconsin, right? Which is an astronomical, it's just a massive number. When we say there's almost 500 districts, and then some of those districts are rural in that your third grade classroom for that district has 7 students. Right? Or less. Your graduating high school class, maybe 20 people or less. When we start talking about that's very different than what we would consider an urban school. right?
Mhm.
Which is typically, typically we're looking at maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500 students in a graduating class. Your third grade students might be 500, 600. And that to me, that speaks to a different kind of practice, right? Dealing with a rural school and a suburban school and then urban schools are all three very different entities. To get them all kind of on the same page around UDL and to start saying we need to implement this, statewide. This is a huge undertaking. That to me, when I was looking through your nomination, I was like, that is amazing. And I want to get to how you both kind of handled that, how you guys game planned that and came up with that. But first, I always have to ask, how did you come to this UDL journey? Like both individually, and then what was the fairy tale meeting of these two great minds that said, yeah, we can take on a state implementation? How did that happen?
Well, to kind of piggyback off the idea of the school districts in Wisconsin, I spent my entire career in education. So I had the ability to work in both urban and suburban districts as well as rural school districts.
Oh,
I believe if you look at our K-12 enrollment in the state of Wisconsin, there's roughly about 805,000 students in public schools.
wow.
Yes, we do have private school enrollment as well. And right now, I believe it's about 150,000 students that are in private schools. Our project, our Wisconsin UDL work, was really funded from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, who supported universal design for learning. And one of the things that we were very proud of is the idea of being the project of yes. We wanted to find ways to create opportunities for school districts, regardless of size, whether they're rural, urban, or suburban, regardless of size, to be able to join in the work and find a good fit for them. So for me, I came to UDL when I was working in my CISA 7 role and had the privilege of joining the state team and starting to really make connections between school improvement work, high quality data work, and the principles of universal design for learning.
Right. So you said CISA. I'm assuming that's SESA. What does that stand for?
CESA, and very good
CESA.
question. Wisconsin has 12 cooperative educational service agencies. I was working at our CISA 7 location, which is kind of in that northeastern Wisconsin area. Joe was also at one of our service agencies called, her CISA was CISA 8. So Joe, if you want to give a little shout out.
Right. We're a more northeastern Wisconsin region than the CISA 7 is.
Wow. So you're like the last outpost in Alaska.
Right, just about. And Wisconsin partnered with CAST starting in 2014.
Right.
And that is really how the Universal Design for Learning ball started rolling in Wisconsin. And I was lucky enough to be part of that initial cohort of CISA consultants that were part of that grant work.
Okay.
And through that, the evolution of a systematic implementation process developed. And then Michelle and I were partnered a few years later as the concept of these classroom-based trials began to materialize. And Michelle and I were partnered because we each have strengths that culminated in having a repeatable and replicable process that happens at the classroom level, but has implications for the larger systems, whether they be schools, districts, or those statewide systems.
Right.
And one of the key features of our role in that was that we partnered with all of the other CISAs throughout the state to develop experts in each of those regions to be able to pick up the trials process and support the school districts in their particular region. So although Michelle and I became the spearhead for the trials, it was because we supported not just classrooms, schools, and districts, but more importantly, we supported those other consultants in all of the regions of Wisconsin who could then turn around and support the districts in their state. So in their region. So it's really important. Smart. Yes, right. So it's really important that these statewide implementations don't stay at the state level department. That technical implementation is supported at every level so that we don't have state people trying to tell classroom people what to do. They're too far removed from what the practical complex situation in a classroom is.
I love that description, JoAnn, because I think it's really key, right? Because it's this idea that you know your classroom as a teacher, and we shouldn't take that away from you. However, you know your classroom, right? And then as a building principal, I kind of know my building. As a district administrator, I know the trends of my district. But then as a state level individual, right, or as a county level individual, I know what's going on in all of the districts in that area. And so by not putting like boundaries on it or saying we are going to tell you what you need to do, you're allowing for these different perspectives to all kind of come in and everybody to play their part and do what they're really good at. I know it sounds simple, but that is massive. That's really that's part of that innovative practice. Like it's not as simple as just knowing what my lane is and staying in it. It's knowing and coordinating all the lanes together. Right. And saying we're going to hold those. And then that weaves into a bigger tapestry. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah. I think one of the key features for us was to ensure that the process wasn't dependent on a specific person. Because again, that intellectual knowledge, if that person leaves, goes with the person. Right. So one of the other pieces for us was, in addition to having that outreach in every CISA region in Wisconsin, we also wanted there to be tools and practical resources that could stand alone and be picked up by anyone who is interested in the trials process, but also who was interested in really learning and bringing universal design for learning to the classroom. So I think, having that great system, having those multiple resources in both the human side of the work, but also in the resource side of the work and the technical tools in place was one of the reasons that our project was sustainable and that the work was sustainable. We really looked at making sure that when a district wanted to dabble in UDL or get their feet wet in UDL, that they did so with purpose and support, but also that they didn't become reliant on an external resource, that if that resource went away, then the work stopped.
Yeah. I see two things to that, Michelle, that I really find interesting. The sustainability is always the hardest part in UDL, right? Because UDL very oftentimes feels almost like this intangible. You know it, but it's real hard because we always have people who are new to UDL who are always saying things like, what does it look like? What does it look like? What does it look like? And you're like, well, it's based on context. It's based on the individuality of your classroom, your students, how that interaction plays, and it's based on the day. And that makes it really hard to say this is exactly what it looks like. And that leads to it being really hard with sustainability. So by building these tools, you hit sustainability. And maybe that's the primary. But I think by being able to release that and having that philosophy of if one person leaves, we don't want to lose the institutional knowledge. We don't want to lose the job knowledge or, any of that. So it becomes more of an invitation as well, which UDL at its very basis is pretty grassroots. Like that's kind of how it started, how it worked. And to scale it up makes it hard. But by making it an invitation, then I get to put my own, I get to put what Bryan Dean interprets and how his classroom flow works within that. Was that intentional? Like that, like having it feel this invitation?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that's amazing.
The choice and autonomy is as important for the professional as it is for the students of that professional.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Say it again for the folks in the back. Yes.
That choice and autonomy. And that, having worked with many teachers using the trials, that was a very important part of their ability to feel like they wanted to do this process. And it's not an easy process.
No.
Because they're interrogating their own practice, something that we feel like we do every day, but this is it's kind of an action research flavor to it, right?
And that can get uncomfortable.
It can get uncomfortable, but because we've put so much choice and autonomy on the teachers themselves, and we really believe in honoring the classroom professionals and their professionalism. Listen, one of the things that I always say is if we trust teachers to grade their students that have lifelong implications for those students, then we ought to trust those teachers to be able to understand whether their practices are changing engagement and impacting academic achievement. And
it's another knowledge bomb. Way to drop it. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. No notes. Perfect.
And I think, unfortunately, since the time of state testing that's come out, federal testing, we've reduced that ability to believe in teachers to know that. We've told them every test has to be validated and scientifically accurate. And our judgments as professionals in the classroom are based on our professional knowledge and our professional experience.
Right.
And those two things, I don't know if I really want to say that they're more valid than state testing, but they're as valid as state testing.
Absolutely. I think that's it. Like there's a place, right? There's a place for state testing. You need to know how you kind of stack up, and it's like part of that feedback loop, right? Like getting a grade is part of the feedback loop. It lets me know how I'm doing, but it is not the only thing. Right? Like, how do I feed up to where I want to go next? How do I feed through so that this stays with me? Those things are just as crucially important in learning. And I think that there's state tests, they have to, there's a certain thing that happens with those, but oftentimes state tests become an autopsy on data that has happened before and not what's happening now. And so
that's exactly right. That's an outcome data piece that tells me about an entire system. It doesn't give me immediate feedback on the impact that I'm having on these students in this time, in this classroom, with the complexities that are involved in this context.
Yeah.
But I do think the one piece that our trials work has emphasized is the importance of evidence. So again, we value our professional practice and professional judgment, but we do want there to be some layer of evidence that tells us. So we move beyond just an intuition about how students are doing into an evidence base that we can make informed decisions around. And I think that's the one piece for us that we really emphasize in the trials work was the collection of data and the analysis of data in order to make meaning from the evidence of universal design for learning and the UDL practices that were put in place in the classroom and how those practices influence student engagement and their academics.
Wow. I mean, that's it, right? And it helps validate my intuition. That's what I've always like. If you've been teaching for 20 years, you kind of know what works and what doesn't work to a certain degree. But if you don't have the evidence that backs it, you can't validate that your intuition is right. You can just fight for it and say, I know, because I know, I know the practice or craft of teaching for 20 years. But UDL and what you folks are discussing, like this idea of the valid evidence collection that is suited, helps reinforce that intuition that I have as a teacher.
And
So it
it's real
validates
time.
me, and it's real time.
Yes.
And it's the
So
kids sitting in
teachers
front of
can
me.
make decisions with that. They can adjust practice with that. They can also adjust strategies for their students, and they can validate and help the students make sense of their own learning.
Which is learner agency. That's amazing.
Right. And we know that the ultimate goal of student agency comes from students being able to talk about their own learning and to monitor their own progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Bryan, let me go back to that intuition piece for just a moment. Because one thing that we found with the teachers that have worked through this trials process is you're right. We, as teachers, oftentimes we say, I know because my intuition tells me I can see it. I know it when I see it. And it's really interesting because our intuition has resulted in the current system that we have. And
you're right. I mean, I didn't want to say it, but yes, ma'am.
When teachers go through this process, because they're collecting that evidence in a way that they can see it, and they can also share it in a common way with their colleagues, it calls into question those assumptions about our intuition that we've made. So teachers have revealed to themselves through this process, and with the data analysis tool that Michelle developed, which is awesome, they have identified for themselves a place where they've been biased with their own intuition on what their teaching has actually meant for all of their students. And they've been able to change practices that were deep-seated, that they thought were working for all students. And having the data in front of them helped them realize it wasn't exactly what I thought I was understanding about my students, because my data now is showing me that trying something different is affecting students that I didn't feel were reachable or cared, or all of those words that we use as teachers to explain away disengagement.
You know what? I find that, so to me, that harkens back to the double loop generative learning and that idea of, there are assumptions I make about learning and assumption as a teacher or an educator I make about learning and students and ability. And then there's something that happens, there's problem solving within the moment. And like, oftentimes we get stuck in the first loop of, here are the results of this test. My kids didn't do great on it, or my students didn't do well on it. I need to reteach the concepts of the test instead of challenging what are my assumptions about their learning or the design of the classroom, design of the curriculum, whatever. What you're doing with evidence that is real-time and evidence collection that is in the moment of these students in front of me is that you're actually putting them in a loop that says there's a problem that we need to solve that is an instructional issue maybe or knowledge issue, but there's also, I have to challenge some of those assumptions I have about what students can do, what learning looks like. That this lesson that I thought for the last 15 years was an absolute banger maybe isn't hitting it like it used to, and he maybe needs an update, right? Like that in and of itself is like this really cool meta and juxta cognition comparison of my practice in real time. That is, it's just another aspect of this that is an innovative way of looking at it, and that it feels so natural. It feels so natural to do it. And like when I'm confronted with that evidence, of course, I want to make sure that I'm doing the best, like building the best lesson. And it doesn't mean throw out the lesson. It means reconsider my assumptions around that lesson. That is so approachable. It's so approachable.
Well, and it's not some outside person telling me that I need to do something different. It's me as a professional realizing that doing something different has an impact on my students that I desire.
Right. And it has an impact on me as an educator.
Yeah.
It makes it so that I want to go to school in the morning and I'm not like in the doldrums of the October blues, as I like to call it, where you're like, we just have to get to the next break. You know what I mean? Like we're not in that. We're in that excitement phase of like, I'm going to try this a little bit differently. Where it's not a slog to sit at my couch on a Sunday night and lesson plan for the week, where I'm actually like, I'm going to try something new here.
Right.
That in and of itself is amazing. But then seeing students accomplishing things at higher levels and doing, better. I mean, better is not a great word to use there, but improving, I think, is also this other side. So you have like these 3 prongs that are going on that are constantly keeping everybody in the mix and having them evaluate who they are as a learner agency, as they are as a teacher agency, and then what we're doing in our system. Wow.
Well, and what we have found through this work, and really based on both testimonials from teachers who have participated in the work, but also the data that we collected around teacher practices, is there has really been significant efforts made in building a culture of collective efficacy.
Oh.
That the mindsets and the practices that are required have really come to the surface using the trials process. So
you just sent shivers through me. You just sent shivers through me with collective efficacy. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and I think the one thing that, for us was so important is knowing that together the trials process was bringing mindsets and practices into focus.
Okay.
So agency and purpose will drive curiosity and deep learning, right? But we also need that practice that's going to support the learning in the classroom. And as we think about collective efficacy, we know, Joe mentioned this earlier, that teaching is complex and uncertain work, right? But we have to use that evidence, or in our case, it's the data, to make that learning experience visible.
Yeah.
And when that learning experience is visible, teachers can then see the results or the impact of their efforts. And that culture starts to take root, not just in one classroom, but in the participating classrooms as the teachers start to pay more attention to their practice and to the outcomes that students are gaining or yielding from those practices.
So I do have a question. Whenever you're kind of, you're making this huge systemic change, enthusiasm and being excited about it just isn't enough for sustainability. It just won't be, right? Like it won't jump the gap of innovation. It'll stall out at about like your majority group that likes it, right? Your majority adopters. But so there has to be something like some structures that are in place that are the most critical non-negotiables. Like we will not budge on this. Did you have some of those when you guys were approaching this? Like you said, these are things that we cannot budge on, that we are going to maintain, and we're going to do those with fidelity.
I think definitely the answer is yes. There are some structures and practices that, when in place, create the environment for the trials work to be successful.
Okay.
Joe and I spent most of our time removing barriers for districts and schools and teachers so that the right work could be the easy work. And when I say easy, I don't mean without struggle. I mean with support and structures and resources in place that make the work not just palatable, but creating opportunities for success.
Yeah.
So some of those non-negotiables for us are time. Teachers have to have some collaboration time to be able to plan and do this work, but also be reflective and analyze the results of this work. Data collection for us and having evidence was a non-negotiable because, again, we don't want to go strictly on assumptions. We really do want that evidence to have a role in both what we say is happening for students in the classroom, but also how we describe the impact of our practices. Mm-hmm. And then I think another non-negotiable is having the appropriate supports in place for those doing the work so they have a community of practice to lean into and to work alongside. Okay. So we created, Joe and I, one of our non-negotiables was having a network for folks who were engaged in this work to come together on a monthly basis and share their celebrations, problem solve together, share strategies and techniques, but also share their data and have those critical conversations about what we're seeing in our classrooms versus what's happening in another school, in another district, on another side of our state.
Right. Right. Well, it's that, I forget the name of the chart, but it is that old chart. If you are missing resources, right, then this is your implementation fails because of this reason. Or if you're missing time, if you don't have the resource of time, or if you have leadership that doesn't understand what's happening, like these different things. I forget the name of the folks who came up. It's the Nostra model. That's right, the Nostra model. Thank you so much. But it's kind of like that in real time, right? It's like that. Like we have these things that we don't negotiate on, and time is one of them. A community to bounce these ideas off of and foster growth of a culture, is something that we don't negotiate on. We have to have those, and having the room for introspection and retrospection are things that we can't negotiate. And it's interesting because those aren't tied to test scores.
No, they're not. And, the other thing, Bryan, that for us, we like folks to, really have a vision for the work that they're going to be doing. Mm-hmm. And again, if you think about that Nostra model of change, you need vision, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan.
Yep, that's what it is.
And we really wrapped the trials work around those components to ensure that anyone who was engaging in the work had access to these particular things, but also knew what they were committing to on an internal basis. Because again, external resources don't necessarily automatically build sustainability within a school, a district, or a system. They can get the ball rolling. They can, create that incentive to move forward and help build the skill. But the resources that need to be in place are often dictated by a particular school or a district and, their calendar and their funding, et cetera. So we really tried to take those 5 elements and consider them as we put in place the trials process and then formed the statewide project to invite schools into this work, knowing that they too were going to be, creating some commitments internally, as well as receiving some incentives from the project itself.
I think that's such a key balance. Because it's not only that there are external resources to help you, but there's culpability, right? While you're getting these things, you also have to be responsible with these things, right? Like you also have to foster these things, foster these 5 areas, right? Like you have to foster your own resources in some way. Resources doesn't just mean money, although oftentimes that's important. It doesn't just mean money. It also means people. It means lots of different things. You have to have clear leadership. And if that leadership is built as a co-built model or co-designed model, it's even better. Like you have to be responsible as a district with these things, as a teacher in your classroom with these things in order for this to work, just as much as have outside help and outside support.
And those tools that Michelle talked about earlier in the UDL Implementation Trial Mentor Toolkit that we wrote together includes a lot of those district and school level supports for leadership. to be able to properly support classroom teachers in implementing the trials work. And all of those tools collectively include communication tools, include planning tools, and it creates a predictable environment that reduces the anxiety that comes along with the unknown when teachers are asked to implement an innovation and only the next step is revealed to them, so they always feel like they're stepping off of a cliff. Right. Our process lays the whole thing out for a year and is adjustable based on each step's success or barrier that is a result of, just being in a school, right? I mean, we had a fire drill, so that meeting couldn't take place. Well, we have flexibility involved in our process to be able to handle those things or handle more adult learning that needs to take place. Well, we have ways to adjust for that.
I think the best thing about the toolkit also is that it is an open source resource for schools and states to look at. We did not want a financial barrier to be present when it came to accessing the tools and supports.
That's that spirit of education. Like, that's
absolutely.
So amazing. That's
absolutely.
So beautiful.
I apologize for interrupting, Joe. I just wanted to give a little plug there that
we'll come to the end,
can access
you got to plug it again. Yeah, you got to plug it again when we get to the end of our conversation here, because I think that's amazing. But
I think that's where the real work is. It's this toolkit. We appreciate being recognized with the award, but the spirit of our work is really having districts and states use the toolkit to bridge that theory of UDL into the practice of UDL that impacts students, as we have seen, in such a positive way. So for me, and I think I speak for Michelle too, it's not about me, it's not about Michelle. It's really about amplifying the toolkit in a way that it can be picked up across not just districts in Wisconsin or states close to Wisconsin, but across the United States and in other places in the world.
Yeah, adapted, easily adaptable, flexible enough, but there is rigor in it. Makes sense. I love that concept of it's like stepping off a cliff and hoping there's something else underneath it. You can't see if there's another cliff, but if I step off, I just have to hope and have faith that there will be something there. And sometimes there isn't. And that's what leads us to implementation burnout. That's what leads us to initiative burnout. Like, okay, I'll just wait this out for the next 2 years because it's not going to work. But like actually having that, saying, here's the next step. And not only is it here, you can see it. So when you step off of this cliff, you know that there is something there. It's not a cliff anymore. It's an actual step. That I think is massive. And then being able to adapt, have the toolkit be both rigorous enough to constitute change and have guidelines around it or structure around it, but also be easily adaptive. That is amazing. Like, there are so many different aspects in this project that are innovative in and of themselves. And when put together, they are just an amazing system of what true innovation science is. Innovation isn't just like, hey, I happened upon something that's kind of cool. Innovation is a planned out thing that has to happen and addresses a need. And there are steps to it and there is process to it. And you have highlighted that. I am just so in awe and so happy and honored to be sitting down in this conversation, because this is one of the blueprints, right? Like, maybe there's another one, but I have not heard of one that is so well planned out and such a great balance of both leadership and outside resource, along with building capacity and agency in those that are involved in that system. That's amazing to me, ladies. It's just amazing.
Well, thank you, Bryan. One of the things that Joe and I also were very committed to is creating a toolkit that wasn't strictly a lot of text. So the toolkit itself, for those folks that really love to kind of read through the process, is there, but we've embedded some videos that accompany certain parts of the process.
Mm-hmm.
We have visuals that help make sense of, some of the text for folks as well. We've created opportunities for folks to access the toolkit in a variety of ways. But what we didn't want was to overwhelm people with a lot of text. So the toolkit is organized for someone who wants to mentor or coach a team through the process. So that's one of the keys for us is the mentoring aspect. Teachers have a lot to do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And as they think about this process and UDL practices, one of the things we wanted for them was to have someone who was going to facilitate going through the process with them. So they didn't have to memorize or worry about every step of the process. They got to actually be present in each step of the process.
Yes.
And reflect on what that step meant to students and their own practice, but also have someone who's going to help facilitate and plan, someone who can be an advisor and a data guide, and someone who can also be their learning leader to help cheerlead and navigate through the trials process. So one of the signature pieces of our toolkit is really creating a mentor for a team who can take on some of those key roles in going through the process and let the teacher focus on the implementation and the teaching, but having somebody there that says, I'm part of the planning. I'm owning this with you. I'm sharing responsibility. I'm going to help facilitate. I can advise and bring the right tools for each step of the process to the table. And, just because teachers work with a lot of data doesn't mean they like data. So, having that mentor who can be that data guide, who is a helpful partner to support not only the gathering of the data, but going through the analysis and those reflective discussions.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we have so much data sitting in front of us, we don't know where the conversation should start.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I call it the consumer to connoisseur.
Yep.
We have so much data, we are taking data all the time in education. We are. Is it the right data? Is it being used in the right place? We don't know because we're consumers of it. We're not connoisseurs of when to use it and how to use it in the right way. And having a mentor just deepens the practice of everybody involved. Wow.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we did when we wrote the toolkit is we wrote it for a mentor. Mm-hmm. So it could be an external mentor, a consultant from a CISA. It could be an internal mentor, a coach. A lot of districts in Wisconsin do have literacy coaches or math coaches. They have curriculum coaches, or in some of our schools, the principal was actually the mentor and mentored teams through the process. But when we wrote the toolkit, we wanted to have a cadence to the toolkit that was consistent for each step of the process. So the toolkit is written for mentors to learn the stage, to grow their own knowledge as a mentor, to lead the work, and to know when to adjust for a team. So the cadence for every stage of this process is learn, grow, lead, and know. And that has been so powerful because, again, the mentor is someone who is a partner in the process rather than laying the process on top of the work that a teacher already has with lesson planning and grading and, classroom commitments.
And having it be, so it's not a consultancy role. It's an embedded role that actually works alongside. I have to tell you, we're coming up on our time, and I could just speak with you. Like, how much time do you have left after the recording? We could just speak for a couple of hours if you want to just hang out. Because this has just been an amazing conversation. We've talked about the toolkit. Where can folks take a peek at this? Where can they crack a view of it?
It's located on the UDL Forward community, the Wisconsin
Okay.
UDL Forward community, which is one of the mighty networks.
Right.
And folks can find it. Bryan, I left a link in our podcast notes to the toolkit. People will have to sign up, but it's free. And they can adjust the notifications so they don't have to worry about getting a bunch of emails or text notifications. And they are free to peruse the whole UDL Implementation Trial Mentor Toolkit. And there's downloadable tools on there. There's lots of information. It includes sort of a background of the toolkit, how we came about this, the connections that states can make to their other initiatives, and then really gets down into the meat and potatoes of running the trials in a school district, adapting them as a process.
And that community, that UDL Forward, the Wisconsin UDL Forward community, is a great community. It's one of those communities that has great conversations, has great experts, has people talking, and experts not in the sense of like, so-and-so is a leader in the field of blah, blah, blah. I mean, those folks are there too, but people who are down in the trenches, down in the dirt and getting it done. I am a member of that community and I absolutely dig it. And so then my next question, and then I'm going to plug some stuff, but my next question is, what's next? Where are we going? What are we doing? Are we like, this was our magnus opus and we are all set and I'm just going to chill it in Mississippi, in Wisconsin, and this will be all right for a while? Or is there something else? Is there more that we're looking at?
Well, Joe and I will always have a passion and fire for UDL and the work. Just as with any version 1, you see, some of the enhancements that can really elevate the work to the next level. So for Joe and I, we, have a version 2 in our future of the toolkit with some enhancements.
Yes. Okay.
Right now, we're kind of taking the show on the road, if you will. We joined Louis Lord Nelson in one of her podcasts.
Are you kidding me? Yeah.
We're trying to, really get the word out beyond Wisconsin borders on the toolkit itself, the process, and the promise that, if you engage in the work, you're going to see some outcomes. Yeah. So for us, it's kind of that twofold of, let's tell our story. Let's make sure people know the toolkit is accessible and free and available. And let's keep dreaming for, what version 2 might look like.
That's right. Grow and show. That's what I call it. You in the grow and show phase. We're going to grow it a little bit more, but we're going to show it all around too and tell our story. I absolutely love that. And teaming up with Louis Lord Nelson, I mean, come on. Right? Like Louis is one of my favorite human beings in the entire world. I absolutely love her. I am a bit of a fanboy for her, but also like she's a pinnacle of our UDL community. And if she gives you an approval, it means you know your stuff. And so that is well deserved in my opinion. I cannot wait to see where this goes. We will put the link to the community and how to join it within our podcast show notes. I will also encourage you to check out some of Cass' resources, not just our publications, but we also have a community that is based around AI and UDL. We're about 2,500, almost 3,000 members thick and deep. And that is also located on Mighty Networks, and you can find it through our website. You can also find it through Mighty Networks. If you just do a search for UDL or Cass UDL community, you'll find it there as well. If you want to know more about Michelle and JoAnn's work or just their bios, check out our podcast notes, but also just kind of check them out, check out what they presented, where their recordings are, because it will blow your mind and you'll be like, yes, I'm on this train. It's not just a hype train. It is a locomotive of change and I dig it. So I want to say, I just really appreciate the conversation and I appreciate you too and the work that you're doing in UDL to bring it to another level. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us on, Bryan.
All right, right on. All right,
can
folks,
I say one more thing, Bryan?
You can say, ma'am, you can say whatever you want.
I want to add to Michelle's explanation of what's next for us. We want folks to know that if they need somebody to help them pick up the toolkit and make sense of it, we're available.
Right on.
So people can connect with us, and we would be happy to consult for a kickoff in a state, in a region, or a district.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And it is something that you're going to want. Like if you are looking at this at a state level, if you were working at a state level looking at implementation, you know how difficult that's going to be, right? And how daunting the task that's going to be. And these two ladies have not only done it, but they've done it well and successfully. And they've done it so that everybody feels really great coming out of it. Like they're really doing something to change education for kids. And in that case, why not just hire them? I dig that idea. I dig that idea. I give them 2 thumbs up. So again, folks, this is a bonus episode. We'll release it and you'll find out more. And we are so excited to have had Michelle and JoAnn here with us, hanging and chilling and talking and dropping the tabernacle service. So with that, I'm going to sign us off with my typical peace, love, and belly rubs. And we'll see you on the flip side, y'all. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Learning Experience Podcast. We are so glad you're a part of this conversation.
And if you're like me and today's episode sparked some ideas or got your brain flowing, well, just remember there's so much more to explore out there.
And remember that CAST is leading the way when it comes to accessibility, workforce innovation, professional development, and research.
So visit cast.org to dive deeper. That's CAST.org, and keep learning with us.